It is fitting and indeed and just, right and helpful to salvation for us always and everywhere to give thanks to you, O Holy Lord, Father Almighty, everlasting God, because by the mystery of the Word made flesh the new light of your glory, and has shone upon the eyes of our mind, that while we acknowledge him to be God seen by men, we may be drawn by him to the love of things unseen. And therefore, with angels and archangels, with thrones and nations, and with the whole host of the heavenly army, we sing a hymn to your glory, sing again and again, Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts, heaven and earth are filled with your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest.
Around mid to late December 1 BC, Miriam was visited by Prince Gabriel. It has been debated as to whether she was in her house or at a well. As Gabriel approached her, he said, "Shalom, favored lady. Adonai is with you." As this was startling to behold, he said to her, "Shalom Aleichem, Miriam, for you have found favor with God. Look, you will become pregnant. You will give birth to a son, and you are to name him Yeshua. He will be great. He will be called the Son of Elon. Adonai, God, will give him the throne of his forefather David, and he will rule the house of Jacob forever. There will be no end to his kingdom." Unlike Zechariah, she trusted the message the angel of severity said. However, she questioned such a vision on the account of her virginity. Thankfully, Gabriel answered the virgin, though in a way as to complexify the situation. "The Ruach HaKodesh will come over you. The power of Ha-Elyon will cover you. Therefore, the holy child born to you will be called the Son of God. You have a relative, Elishba, who is an old woman, and everyone says she is barren, but she has conceived a son and is 6 months pregnant. For with God nothing is impossible." She submitted to her calling to be the mother of Ba-al-Kakai. As the prince left her, she now had one thing on her mind, seeing Elishba. That day or around that day, she left for Hebron to visit her cousin. Yosef was most likely informed of the sudden departure of his legal fiancée. They were still in the 10 months to a year of their legally binding engagement. He knew it might be a few months before she returned, given that she would have had to travel a few days to get to Hebron and a few days to return. Given that he probably had found out through word of mouth that Elishba was pregnant, he knew that Miriam would most likely spend a while with her down in Hebron. He, though, did not know about the circumstances of Miriam's pregnancy, much less Elishba's pregnancy. When she arrived at the house, Miriam gave a greeting to Elishba. At the greeting of her cousin, Elishba felt her son leap within her womb. Elishba said, "How blessed are you among women, and how blessed is the child in your womb." Her 14-year-old cousin replied by asking why she was chosen out of all the women in Israel. Her cousin Miriam stayed with them until at least March of AD 1. In March of AD 1, Elishba gave birth to a son. On the 8th day, the child was circumcised per Genesis 17:10 through 13. Zechariah when asked what he wanted to name his son, motioned for a writing tablet. Upon writing the name Yochanan, his vocal cords were loosened. Immediately he spoke a blessing. Blessed be Adonai, the God of Israel, because he has visited and made a ransom to liberate his people by raising up for us a mighty deliverer, who is a descendant of his servant David. It is just as he has spoken through the mouth of the prophets from the very beginning, that we should be delivered from our enemies and from the power of all who hate us. This has happened so that he might show the mercy promised to our fathers, that he would remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore before Abraham our father, to grant us that we, freed from our enemies, would serve him without fear, in holiness and in righteousness before him all our days. You, child, will be called a prophet of Ha-Elon. You will go before the Lord to prepare his way by spreading the knowledge among his people. The deliverance comes by having sins forgiven through our God's most tender mercy, which causes the rise to visit us from heaven, to shine on those in darkness, living in the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the paths of peace. After that, Miriam left to return to her hometown of Nazareth. By this time, she was 3 months pregnant. By now, she had been experiencing morning sickness. A virgin, 3 months pregnant? This did not make sense, especially to her legally binding soon-to-be husband Joseph. He started to contemplate what to do regarding their engagement. Her pregnancy seemed to indicate that she had committed adultery, which was punishable by death on the testimony of 2 or 3 male witnesses. Joseph, who had been studying Torah since the engagement was made, knew he would need 2 male witnesses to give their testimony of catching Miriam and her paramour before the Lesser Sanhedrin in Nazareth, which was the court of 23 elders, or the city council. If the majority of the judges voted for acquittal, they would be acquitted. If a majority of the judges voted guilty, Miriam and her paramour would be executed through stoning. If all 23 judges voted guilty, they would be acquitted, as there would be something wrong with the court. The result will not only be the death of Miriam, but the shame of both families. On the grounds there were no 2 male witnesses to her infidelity, Joseph could not bring her before the Lesser Sanhedrin. A second solution, as there were no male witnesses to her infidelity, was the Sukkah, per Numbers 5:11 through 31. The result would not only be the possible death of Miriam, but also the shame for both families and the couple. He rather began to favor breaking the legally binding engagement, which would disgrace both families. Joseph would have recalled that Proverbs 18:22 says, "He who finds a wife finds a great good. He has one favor of Adonai." Right now, though, he most likely felt more like the prophet Hosea, trapped in humility and sick to his soul. As he worked in his shop, men probably gave him looks of heartbreak for him. As Miriam went to draw water, women likely jeered at her in disgust. As Joseph left the gate to get lumber, the elders probably tried to encourage him. As Miriam learned to do her feminine roles while pregnant and Joseph dealt with trying to focus on his labors, the townsfolk committed slander against the two. As he slept one night during the 4th or 5th month of Miriam's pregnancy, the oil lamps Joseph's house bowed low, a wind entered the house as the air in the house grew still. In a moment that most likely echoed when Abraham saw his vision of the torch and censer, per Genesis 15:1-4, Joseph awoke to the sound of footsteps. Given Nazareth being the rough village it was, he prepared to fight until he saw the figure in his house. Looking upon Prince Gabriel, Joseph probably marveled at his sword and shofar, knowing well this moment was not an ordinary messenger coming to take his prayer request to the throne and bringing his blessings to him. The prince said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Miriam home with you as your wife. For what has been conceived in her is from the Ruach HaKodesh. She will give birth to a son, and you are to name him Yeshua, because he will save his people from their sins." As Joseph woke up in the morning light, he likely possessed a sense of calm that passed all understanding. He possibly went to the synagogue and read some passages before he went to Miriam's father's house. To the disbelief of all, he announced his intentions to continue with the marriage. At the wedding ceremony, likely a smaller crowd than expected gathered to attend. Most of the guests had most likely returned their invites as they wished not to be a part of a slanderous wedding. In the wake of the uncomfortable and unusual wedding, the slander, what later will be considered gossip, spoken among the villagers, their families, and their friends probably intensified. While Joseph and Miriam enjoyed married life and were expecting a 1,860-year-old promise, a political move was made in Rome. As Joseph woke up in the morning light, he likely possessed a sense of calm that passed all understanding. He possibly went to the synagogue and read some passages before he went to Miriam's father's house. To the disbelief of all, he announced his intentions to continue with the marriage. At the wedding ceremony, likely a smaller crowd than expected gathered to attend. Most of the guests had most likely returned their invites as they wished not to be a part of a slanderous wedding. In the wake of the uncomfortable and unusual wedding, the slander, what later will be considered gossip, spoken among the villagers, their families, and their friends probably intensified. While Joseph and Miriam enjoyed married life and were expecting a 1,860-year-old promise, a political move was made in Rome. Perpetual Imperial Legate of Syria, Gaius Julius Caesar Vipanius, on orders of Emperor Augustus Caesar, issued a decree demanding a tax based upon a man's ancestor. This tax required every man to go to the city where his most distant ancestor was born. This meant that every man had to go to the ancestral city of the head of his line. Upon looking at Joseph's family tree, one could ascertain that the generations predating the United Kingdom should be removed from consideration of where he was to go. This left the generations that existed after 1050 BC. The closest of these ancestors was Zerubbabel, but he had a convoluted ancestry on account of confusion as to whether he was the nephew or son of Shealtiel. The most distant ancestor then was David, who was born in Bethlehem, or Bethlehem. Though the two cities were only 23 miles away, no Jew worth his bar mitzvah would enter the hills of Ephraim where the Shoromni, or Samaritans, dwelt. Joseph would have to travel to a ford, cross the Jordan River into the Decapolis, travel along the Jordan River through Perea, and cross the ford near Jericho. Though it wasn't safe for his wife to travel, given that she was in the third trimester, Joseph could not leave Miriam behind to obey the yoke of Rome. In mid-August 1 AD, Joseph and Miriam joined a caravan bound for the east. After fording the river, they would have either gone along the eastern bank of the Jordan or down the King's Highway. Nearing the Dead Sea, they would have turned and headed for Beth-araba. Crossing the ford there, they would have gone through Jericho and then to Jerusalem. From Jerusalem, they would have gone to Bethlehem. Near the middle of the city, they could not find any vacancy in the shelters beside a house. This was the style of the inn in this era. The innkeeper, though, offered them shelter in the cave where he kept his livestock. This cave was open to public view and was bought by Joseph to rent and stay in. In this cave, Miriam went into labor as night fell. Around a mile or two outside of Bethlehem, on a hillside, were Levitical shepherds watching over their flocks. These shepherds had the role of raising sheep for the temple sacrifice. They could not participate in the weekly Shabbat services in the synagogues, as they were ritualistically unclean due to their job. The nature of their job, in which they had to work on Shabbat, caused them to defile the day. As they defiled the day, they were cut off from gathering with worshippers. As the citizens and travelers settled down for the night, midwives rushed to the cave. Though Miriam was in the pain of childbirth, the intensity has been debated. Isaiah 66:7 states, "Before going into labor, she gave birth. Before her pains came, she delivered a male child." One interpretation of this verse holds that this is a prophecy that the Virgin Mother would have a painless delivery. This misinterpretation has been adopted as a standard teaching by the Roman Catholic Church and its 23 churches Soudos. In the context of the chapter, Isaiah 66 verse 7 refers to the ease by which the devout Jews will be saved in the end time, better known as the remnant of true Jerusalem, and how easily they will gather in the millennial kingdom. They will not have any difficulty traveling there. However, the curse given to Eve was upon Miriam as well. She most likely did have pains, though they may not have been as intense as it is for many women. After the child came forth and his umbilical cord was cut, he was washed, salt was rubbed on his body, and he was wrapped in sheep clothing, which is cloth meant to detect impurities in lambs. Joseph blocked the entrance of the Levitical shepherds until they explained that they had a vision. In this vision, an angel told them, "Don't be afraid, because I am here announcing to you good news that will bring great joy to all the people. This very day in the town of David, there was born to you a deliverer who is the Messiah, the Lord. Here is how you will know. You will find a babe wrapped in clothes and lying in a feeding trough." Soon an army of messengers appeared and praised the Eternal One. The shepherds were allowed to see the infant, who was lying in a feeding trough, which was a hewn niche in the wall of a cave. After they left, the couple and the infant rested. For 7 days, Miriam observed the regulations of a woman on her menstrual cycle. In late September or early October, he was given his circumcision and named Yeshua. Over this period, Yosef bought or built a house. On the fourth day of his life, Yeshua was brought to the temple to be redeemed, while Miriam brought her offerings per Leviticus 12:6-8. According to my research, it was possible that the priestly clan Abijah, to which Zechariah and Elishba belonged, was serving at the temple that week. Joseph was questioned by a priest if this was his firstborn child, to which he answered yes. The priest asked if he would rather have the child or the money. When Joseph replied, "The child," the priest took the $35.80. Miriam gave another priest her 2 turtle doves, as that is what she could afford. A priest by the name of Simeon was attending to his duties when the Ruach HaKodesh told him to go out to the court of women. At the foot of the steps leading to the gate of Nakor, he found the Holy Family. Descending the steps, he took the child in his arms. It was appropriate to presume that the Ruach had told him that this child he was holding was the salvation promised in the last words said by Jacob to his son Judah. The same promise given to the prophets Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, Malachi, and Zechariah. Simeon first thanked the Eternal One by saying, "Now Adonai, according to your word, your servant is at peace as you let him go. For I have seen with my own eyes your Yeshua, which you prepared in the presence of all nations, a light that will bring revelation to the Goyim and glory to your people Israel." Possibly up to a few months or 2 years later, caravans descended upon Jerusalem's metropolitan area. These caravans could pertain to one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Amid the caravans traveling all over Judea, a massive caravan of soldiers and Zoroastrian astrologers traveled along Via Maris. Upon reaching Jaffa, they turned and traveled along the road to Jerusalem. After arriving at the Holy City, they sought an audience with Herod Archelaus. The purpose of the audience was explained to the enarch as, "Where's the newborn king of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." Out of spite, the ethnarch seemed to request information about when the star appeared before sending them out to wait for his consideration. Herod Archelaus summoned and consulted the leading priests and Torah scholars about the place where the Messiah was to be born. Quoting the prophecies of Micah of Moresh Gath, these men replied, "In Bethlehem of Judah," or Bethlehem of Judah. Herod Archelaus dismissed them and summoned the Zoroastrian astrologers. He requested them to return after finding the exact location of where the child was. They left and found that the star rested over the house where Joseph and his family lived. They not only worshipped the child, but they also brought an approximate maximum of gold, frankincense, and myrrh in amounting to $1,222,321,000. After they left David's town, they all had a vision in which they were instructed to bypass Jerusalem and return to their home countries. The explanation was given to them as the Ethnarch sought to kill the child. They crossed the wilderness and forded the Jordan before returning home. That same night, Joseph was told to leave Egypt. Joseph led his family with a handsome portion of the spices and gold. There are two possibilities of how they traveled to Egypt. One, they joined a caravan bound for the west. This caravan traveled along the road to Jaffa. Upon finding a caravan bound for Egypt, the Holy Family would have traveled along the Via Maris, or the sea route. After leaving Raphia, they reached Pelusium. Or two, they joined a caravan bound for the west. This caravan traveled to Gaza. From Gaza, the Holy Family would have traveled along Via Maris. After leaving Raphia, they would have arrived in Pelusium. Either way, tradition dictates that the Holy Family went to Pelusium, or from Pelusium to Bupatis or Basta, stopping to rest by a tree while on the way. Reaching Bupatas or Basta, the idols in the town are said to have collapsed before the presence. Underground water erupted through the soil as if Egypt itself was welcoming the Prince of Heaven in a refreshing salutation. From Basta, they traveled to Mostrod, where Miriam bathed Yeshua and washed their clothes. It was the first time since they left their home in Bethlehem that she was able to do so. From Mostrod, they arrived in Belbis, where they rested under another tree. Though they tarried in Salmud, they traveled through the land of Belkas to Kois. From Kois, they traveled through Wadi Natron and rested under a tree near Hippolis. Nearby was the synagogue of Jonas, which served either a large Hellenistic, meaning non-devout Greek-speaking, or a Hellenic, meaning a devout Greek-speaking Jewish population. Yeshua is said to have caused a spring to erupt forth nearby. It was here that the Holy Family got water, and the mother washed his and their clothes again. As they passed through Hippolis to Zaitun, they arrived at Fustat. It was here that the idols once again fell as the Holy Family passed by them. The Holy Family was forced out by the nomarch due to the civil unrest resulting from the pagan perspective of the desecration of the idols, or from the desecration by Christ destroying the idols. It was regarded as desecration to those pagans. The Holy Family traveled past Babylon Fortress, which was a Roman fort in the Delta, then to Mahdi, before crossing the Nile. After drinking, bathing, and washing from a well, the Holy Family traveled to Gabal al-Tahrir, where the Holy Family lived in peace. Upon learning that the astrologers had departed the nation without returning to the holy city, Herod ordered all the boys 2 years and under living in Bethlehem to be slaughtered. The question often arises, why 2 years? Is because the star appeared in 2 BC, 2 years prior. As they were slaughtered, the words of Jeremiah 31:14 unfolded. A voice was heard in Ramah, sobbing and lamenting loudly. It was Rachel sobbing for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no longer alive. In AD 6, Gabriel appeared to Joseph for a third time and told him to take the Holy Family back to Nazareth. Christ was about 5 years of age by then. Imagine the family he never knew incarnate until then. Imagine the slander still spoken by people about his parents. This meek child whose parents were slandered and they were judged by a portion of the villagers for what they were incapable of understanding. It was these same villagers that slandered his parents that he would redeem 27 years later. According to tradition, there were 14,000 children or boys under 2 years of age who were slaughtered in Bethlehem by the soldiers. Their bones were, according to tradition, laid to rest in tombs beneath a nearby area of the cave in which Christ was born.
Now, every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor.
We do not know much about St. Mary nor Christ's lives from AD 13 to AD 28 or 29. We can conjecture that she helped him as she could in his carpentry business he opened around AD 19. Once Christ left for his baptism solitude, we lose track of St. Mary until the next biblical mention of her.
On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as a fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in our own native language, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents in Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and Gentiles, Cretans and Arabs, in our own language, as we hear them speaking about the Lord's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?"
On August 15th, AD 50, near the Garden of Gethsemane, the Immaculate Conception lay dying upon her bed in the house she lived in. As she lay dying, she was visited by her firstborn son's disciples. Bishop Simon Peter of Antioch and St. John the Theologian had been in Jerusalem for the council and were the closest to her house. St. James the Lesser had an evangelist field within the Judean province, making him the next closest. For the other saints who were on their missionary trips, they were spiritually teleported, just as Philip the evangelist had been in Acts 8:39 through 40. Saints Philip and Bartholomew were teleported from Asia, while St. Andrew, the first called, was teleported from the Balkans and Greece, or even possibly from the Slavs. From Persia and Mesopotamia, respectively, were Saints Thomas and Thaddeus teleported. Saint Simon the Zealot was somewhere between Matrusia and Georgia, while Saint Matthias was somewhere between Macedonia, Pontus, Syrian Antioch, Edessa, and Pontine, Ethiopia, when he was teleported. Finally, from somewhere around the Syriac world, St. Matthew was teleported. As she passed away, the entire church mourned her. Meanwhile, she was reunited with her firstborn son, her adoptive son, St. James the Greater, and all her relatives. As she was essential in the temporal fulfillment of the Messianic prophecies, she is honored in the Nicene-Constantinopolitan Creed. However, this creed is not an elevation of the Immaculate Conception, but a statement of Catholic faith which confidently states her status as the Immaculate Conception. It is part of the liturgy of the canon of Mass.